everyone, welcome to the next video on our series. This one's going to talk about self-sufficiency and international trade. Now, as countries are trying to develop and move into the world market, there's two basic ways that they can go about doing it. They can do it through self-sufficiency, which means they're going to try to do it entirely on their own and not getting any outside help. Or they can do it through international trade, where they try to move into the international market. Now, the big thing to understand with this is that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting worse and worse. Basic things like electricity, clean water, paved roads really are preventing a lot of countries from moving into the international market. We see this a lot in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. And because they don't have the infrastructure, they can't bring businesses in to boost their economy. Now, the countries themselves have two major problems in trying to develop. First, how do they adopt the policies? Do they have a stable government which will promote these policies and be able to do it? And the second one is money. It always kind of comes back to money. Do they have the money to rebuild their infrastructure or to build an infrastructure and to recruit these companies? So let's go ahead and take a look at each one of these: self-sufficiency and international trade. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is when a country on its own is trying to get into the global market and become economically successful. So the production and the businesses will all be owned by people within that country. The government then has to prevent foreign influence. They might limit foreign imports into their country. They might limit if you can be a foreign company owning anything in their country. The other idea they might do is a heavy tariff. Now, a tariff is a tax on foreign goods coming into that country. The goal is to raise the price of that foreign good so that people will buy a domestic good instead. Anybody buying the foreign good then pays that tax, and that goes back into the government reserves. The government then uses its tax money and its import tax money, and they try to go throughout the country, boosting the economy throughout the country, maybe improving infrastructure, transportation. They might try to make sure that there's more jobs in different sectors, like primary sector jobs and secondary sector jobs. The whole goal is to try to make sure the country as a whole is being boosted, that rural sections are becoming just as economically successful as urban areas. A great example of self-sufficiency is India. They tried it. They made it very difficult for foreign countries to get licenses to be able to build things anywhere in their country. They really limited the amount of foreign goods that were coming into their country, including heavy tariffs. The government gave huge subsidies for struggling businesses and helped businesses get going. The government also created businesses and were selling things and really trying to boost that local economy. So did it work? You're going to have to stick around later into the episode to find out. So if a country doesn't choose to do self-sufficiency, their other option is the international trade path. The main goal is to find and develop a unique economic asset that the rest of the world wants. So what animal do you have? What vegetable? What mineral? What do you have that people want on the world market? Some countries that perform well with the international trade model are the four Asian dragons. You need to know these four countries for the AP Human Geography exam: South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan. Now, while they did not have a lot of resources, they did have large cities, and that gave the world cheap labor to be able to build products there. So clothing, electronics, and other manufacturing are well known to be there. Another example is the Arabian Peninsula. Countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. There's mostly sand there. That's pretty much what's in the Middle East. But they had oil, and they sell that oil to the Western nations that have a huge demand for it to build roads, housing, and to be able to import food and other goods that they're unable to make in their country. So the moment you've been waiting for, which one's the more successful model? Is it self-sufficiency? Is it international trade? And the answer is international trade. What we'll see is that a country that can find a resource to offer the rest of the world becomes more successful. Japan has done quite well since World War II in the world market. We've seen Eastern Europe recover from the Cold War when the Soviets occupied them by having resources that are in high demand. So countries that were trying self-sufficiency in the 80s and 90s converted over in the 1990s, including India. India now has a booming car industry. They're a leading clothing manufacturer, and they have call centers. So countries, if they want to be successful, have to find a way to get into that international market and find resources or maybe have cheap labor that can bring them into the world market.